Welcome to the Be Ruthless Show, where we have the conversations that other people don't, the conversations that other people won't. I'm your host, Sam Ruth, and I'm ready to make a lot of noise and disrupt things, ruthlessly. Thanks for being here today. Now let's get to it. Welcome back to the Be Ruthless Show. I'm your host, Sam Ruth, and joining me today is Elizabeth Barbour, who since 2000 has coached thousands of women to find their way back to solid ground when life gets chaotic and overwhelming. Elizabeth intimately understands the twists and turns of life's transitions, having weathered the pain of divorce twice, the death of her parents, emotional struggles surrounding adoption, the indescribable heartache of marriage and fertility, complex family relationships, a near-fatal car accident, health setbacks, and cross-country relocations. Just a few right there. Elizabeth guides women through a self-care and ritual process where grief and gratitude can live side by side. Through her coaching program, Solid Ground, navigating transition when it's all just too much. A firm believer in the power of community, she guides her clients to create connections so they aren't left to carry the weight of their grief alone. As a life coach and shamanic practitioner, she brings a unique blend of traditional coaching techniques and ancient wisdom to her practice. Elizabeth is the author of 2 books, Smart Self-Care for Busy Women and Sacred Celebrations, Designing Rituals to Navigate Life's Milestone Transitions. Thank you so much for being here. I don't think you've been through enough. I don't think you're qualified to be here.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I need a few more big life events, huh?
My God.
Yeah, and a lot of that is just in the last. Oh,
I say to people sometimes, like, some people don't go through this in a lifetime.
yeah.
It's not like you're 80.
And the interesting part of that, Sam, is that a lot of that was just in the last 3 years. Moves, divorce, death of 2 parents, car wreck. Yeah. But I'm still standing. I'm here.
You are a warrior, and I'm glad you mentioned moves because people do not talk enough about how much of a transition and an impact that plays. That's up there on the top, I believe 3, but it's definitely a major life event.
It is a major, major life event. And people focus, I think, a lot on the logistics of the move and not on the emotions of, you've lived a place for 2 or 5 or 20 or 40 years, and then you leave. You're so rooted, and then to have to uproot is a very painful and challenging process.
I moved to marry the one who got away, the love of my life. It was my happily ever after.
Mm-hmm.
But it was professionally a nightmare. It was to a city that was chaos. I had nothing familiar. I mean, the anxiety that I've lived with skyrocketed, and that's all invisible.
Yeah.
Right. So it was supposed to be this amazing thing, and no one sees my supports are not just around the corner that you can go to lean on.
Right. Right. Well, and I think with all of life transitions, whether you're talking death, marriage, divorce, move, health crisis, starting a new job, losing a job, whatever, the emotions are so complex. It's not an either or, it's a both and. It's you can be excited to move and start your life with someone new and be in a new place, but there's grieving that happens at the same time. And I think we live in, and you know this, I mean, you're so excellent at reminding us about this, but we live in this culture that doesn't honor and acknowledge grief in the way that it really deserves to be given attention.
And I'm an outgoing, extroverted, go out and get that, get things done. So I will never forget someone close in my bubble saying, when I mentioned, this is tough for me, driving alone, getting from A to B, saying, oh, I don't want to hear that with Meetup and all of the ways that you can meet people. that's, nonsense type of a response, just not even understanding
Oh,
the emotional toll, because it is so easy. It looks so easy in this world to
mhm,
access what you need. But that
mhm.
doesn't mean it, even with grief at all, accessing anything for me was so difficult. My light bulb burning out and finding a handyman was the
Yes.
end of the world. I tell this always. I called my brother in Michigan as if he had the solution in Colorado.
Well, and I think, and I'm so sorry that happened to you. And I think that dismissiveness happens often, doesn't it? We make assumptions about other people and how they're managing transition or grief or loss or change. And then we project onto them. But one person's experience of grief or loss is completely different than somebody else's. So you can't judge it. It's like it just is. It just is what it is.
But we do live in this world where it could appear simple. There are
Yes.
things instantly available. That doesn't mean they're easily acceptable when you've been through a loss, which is a trauma. People
Yes.
don't see the other things that happen, or our invisible brain that changes immediately.
Yes.
So talk about designing rituals.
Sure. Yes. So I have found through my work over the years that rituals are one of the most powerful ways to help us navigate transition. Because what rituals do is they allow us space to be fully present, to experience whatever emotions we need to experience, to rest, to either connect with ourselves, with the spiritual world as we know it, or with others in community. And I think that when we give ourselves permission to create a ritual, whether it's literally like a 10-minute ritual or if it's like a day long thing, we can talk more about, what are some of the distinctions between those. But it's a moment in time that allows us to sort of catch up with ourselves.
I love that you already mentioned it can be 5 minutes. Because people automatically think I have to wait until Saturday when I have 4 hours. So things get
Yes.
put off that can help us.
Yes.
And so I have a lot of rituals that are short and simple that I can not only do at the times I plan, but I can also do multiple times a day if something pops up that impacts my mood when life happens.
Yes. Yes, exactly. I'm curious, what are some of your little rituals that help you to get regrounded and rebalanced?
Any like writing letters to Jim, talking to Jim always. It's funny because I have 2 dogs now, but I had one at the time he passed away. We together, because she was grieving as much as I was. She knows the evening ritual. Like if I'm a little late, if I'm distracted, she will come, knows me, and knows I have a little heart-shaped thing by my nightstand that has some ashes in it. And she will
Mm,
nudge it and me, meaning like, let's sit down together. It's time.
wow.
Isn't it amazing?
Yes. Our animals are so tuned in.
And it would like, I wasn't leaving her anywhere, certainly, so she was like right there. We were crying together and writing. But for whatever, I don't hold it now, but I must have been holding it while I was doing it back then.
Yes. Yes, I love that. That's such a great example of that. I have one that I can think of this morning for me, that as I was getting ready, knowing that I was going to be a guest on your podcast today, and knowing that we were talking specifically about grief and grief rituals, I put on two necklaces. One that belongs to my adoptive mother who passed away in 2016, and then the other one that belongs to my biological mother who just passed away about 8 or 9 months ago.
Wow. Okay. So these are more topics that are not discussed. Adoption is you don't talk about it that much unless you're in that world.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast conversation, Sam. I've been talking about adoption for many, many years. And yeah, adoption is a system built on grief and loss. And so I've done a lot of work with adult adoptees, with biological parents, with adoptive parents, because I'm also an adoptive mom. So I'm a reunited adoptee. Um, I have 11 half brothers and sisters. And my birth mom has passed away. My birth dad is still living, which is wonderful. But I was raised by my adoptive parents, and they're both deceased. But then I'm also an adoptive mom. And so I have a 13-year-old daughter, and we're in reunion with her biological dad, but not her mother. And so there's grief there that we're managing.
If we were taught to address and handle these topics, many people wouldn't discover later in life that they had unresolved issues. Being a psychologist, you're forced, whether you want to or not, to go through therapy. And so getting my master's, someone said, oh my God, I never knew I struggled with being adopted until now, while you're making me deal with this.
Yes.
Of course there are feelings. It's inevitable. If we talked about it, she could have dealt with that 15 years earlier.
Yes.
So, I mean, to
Yes.
me, that is grief, period.
Absolutely. It absolutely is. Well, and I think what you're talking about too is the idea that trauma, no matter the trauma, whether we're talking
Yes.
about adoption or something else, really forms our identity. You know, it's that and I don't remember the exact phrase, don't know what they're dealing with today. You know, you can see somebody at the grocery store and, you know, they just had a loved one pass away the day before, or, you know, see someone, you know, your neighbor walking down the street and their dog just died. I mean, you know, you never know what people are carrying. And it really impacts how we show up in the world and who we are and how we identify with ourselves, but also in our connections with other people.
So connections, I want to go back to, you put these on, these two necklaces, for rituals.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Not something that you do every day. These aren't.
No, I don't wear these necklaces every day. Be honestly, because they're gold and I tend to wear more silver. But there was something today I knew when we were going to be talking about grief and grief rituals and the power of them, and the different types that we can do. And we should probably get into that a little bit. But I thought, okay, I need Joan and Kathy to be with me. And, you know, I wanted to also just mention one other thing. You were talking about the little heart that you have by your bedside. I don't know if you have this, but I have an ancestral altar where I have photos of all of my loved ones who have passed on. So parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, you know, dear friends, pets, even, they're all up on my ancestral altar. So that's a ritual that for me is really profound, spending time with that.
Mine are not all in one place for some reason. They're here.
Mm-hmm.
They're just in their own places to make me smile, and, you know, I say hello.
So kind of scattered throughout the house. That's great though. But yeah, those reminders, those touchstones.
Connections, which, if we again had these discussions, pain is pain. Having other people who understand what we have been through, different pains, we still understand, and finding other widows who were further along was such a big part of my healing. Not talking about things, keeping it in, denies you that opportunity. So you mentioned connections as a part of the rituals, that there's a piece of that together.
Absolutely. And the book that I just wrote and was just released a few months ago is called Sacred Celebrations. It's specifically focused on rituals where we connect with other people. I do mention some of the private rituals that we can do, but there's a lot that's out there written about that. For me, what I wanted to focus in on is those times when we gather with other people where we get to be witnessed. And that's what you just talked about, is that when you share a circle, whether it's in person or virtual or text or email, whatever, however the connection happens. But when you share a circle of other people who've been through an experience that you've been through, you are seen and validated and acknowledged in a totally different way than just the everyday person off the street, because they know what you're going through.
Not only the everyday person off the street, talk to me about if you've been through this with your different losses, and then we can go into the different types of loss.
Sure.
My family. So I'm family first. I was just on a podcast and they asked me something about my priorities, and I said family first, even with, how mission driven I am. Friends and family that I have are my world. I will do anything. But there comes some sort of comparison with the people who knew me and Jim, knew my life. There is how are you doing today? Oh, you look good. There's something there that doesn't exist with the new people that I've let in who only know me since my loss. And so
Yes.
for me, someone who's lived with anxiety, but anyone who's dealt with grief knows that there is anxiety that comes. Seeing people who knew me, friends and family, particularly friends, Jim's friends even, it was harder for me for a stretch of time to see the people who knew me than it was to see my new people.
Yes. Well, that makes total sense because they're seeing all of you. And so you were incredibly vulnerable. They knew it all, and you couldn't hide from them.
I didn't want to hide.
Right.
Like, I'm one of the people who I was like, I'm not okay. Not going to pretend I'm okay to make you feel better.
Right.
That's
so
okay.
healthy.
Right. That's okay with our world.
Yes.
Old world wants us to get back to being like, come on, let's get back to being fun, Sam.
It is so ridiculous to me that we live in a culture that, if you think about like people who work in the corporate world, you get 3 days of bereavement leave. You can go to do the funeral, do what you need to, and then get back to work. Are you freaking kidding me?
Some get one.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, and it's only if it's your immediate family, if it's like a spouse or a parent or a child. But what about if, you're closest to your grandparent or a sibling or, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. It is ridiculous how our Western culture has not allowed for the space for us to grieve properly. Yeah.
So I said, we talked about swearing before we start. I said, I don't care. Like, I could not pretend. Not who I am, but I physically was not capable of pretend. I had zero energy or capacity to do anything more than survive. So your needs just it didn't matter. I could not, but then I reached the I would not. Like, I just went through the worst thing in the world. Why should your needs be on my list? You should be concerned about mine. Anger came in. We talk about the stages of grief, which mean nothing. They exist, but not in the order, they all come at once.
Right.
And so my
Yes.
anger wasn't anger at Jim or anger in that way. It was anger at like the world. Why are you expecting me to be okay? I'll show you. I am
Yes.
not. This is what grief looks like.
Yes. It's messy and chaotic. Let me ask you this. Did you lose some friends during that time?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yes.
We all have those secondary losses. I wasn't getting
Yes.
back to Fun Sam quickly enough.
Yep.
Others going through it right now, listening, it will not make it hurt less, not one iota. But that did absolutely make room for the new people who
Yes.
are such a huge part of my life that I cannot imagine my life without.
Mm.
We've connected, some of the people who who you're connecting with through me, like those people wouldn't be in my world if I had kept people who weren't accepting me where I was.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think, it's about capacity too. Do we have the capacity to embrace it all of the emotions, all of the complexities, all of the seeming disparate pieces of it? I think one of the hardest parts is, um, when you're grieving and you're in this really dark place, whether it's anxiety or depression or just, barely functioning. And then you have a good day or a good moment and people go, oh yeah, you're back. And you're like, yeah, no, I'm not really back. I've had a moment of lightness and I'm celebrating that and I'm not done. And I don't know if you're ever done with grieving. You learn to carry it differently.
And okay moments, certain moments, there's that level, but happy moments, like really celebratory moments for me, are followed by pain because Jim's not here. I like to,
I wish he was here.
right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
that's right. Welcome back to reality. You should
Right.
be here. And
Yes.
everyone going through it says that happy and sad now coexist.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's learning how to live with the both and.
Talk about the different types of grief that you mentioned.
Yeah. Different types of grief or different types of rituals.
Well, both.
Okay. um, I think, let's talk about death a little bit first, since that's obviously one of the most universal. We're all going to experience it and have losses. I think there are different types of rituals that we think about with grief. The more traditional, obviously, is having a funeral or having a celebration of life or having a wake or something like that. Perhaps burying the body or burying someone's ashes. But I think often we stop there. We start to think, okay, it's done. It's over. We've had this moment of celebration and honoring and respecting and grieving and sadness and connection with family, because, what's the saying, families only get together with weddings and funerals. And there is some truth to that for sure. But then we just go on with our lives. And I think it's a lot of the smaller rituals that are just as important because those are the ones that help us process through the grief. The first birthdays, the first anniversaries, the first, I don't know, baby that's born in a family and, the grandparent or whoever's not there, to celebrate anymore. I think those are so critical, is to do those smaller rituals. In fact, I just found out one of my brother's was supposed to come visit me this weekend, and now he's rethinking it because our uncle, um, he just passed away about 2 months ago, and his birthday is this coming weekend. And my brother lives farther away near other cousins. And he's like, oh, I think a couple of us are going to gather to celebrate Uncle Tom's birthday. And I was like, absolutely. You need to stay for that. You don't need to come see me. We'll get together another time. And if I could, I would go see him, but that's not really an option right now. But, but it's this idea of finding those smaller occasions to, keep memories alive and to tell stories and to remember and to have a safe space to cry and be sad, and reflect and remember. And again, it goes back to witnessing for me. It's about, when the people who've had the deepest loss are surrounded by other people who know and love them, it just helps to carry the burden.
Jim was a Sigma Pi, and his
Yeah.
fraternity brothers are his family. And
Yeah.
we always talk about how going to college, saved him, changed him. That's his family.
Yes.
And I'm so grateful. Those brothers are my family. They still, take care of me, reach out, stay in touch always. They still get it, right? Like they still are in as much pain as I am. We get it. We talk. His in-laws, my in-laws and I had to cut ties, but that's his family. But they do at least at least once trip to some sort of a national park, because that was Jim's love and something that they all started doing together. And I love that. They do so many things. That's not the only thing they do, but they'll say like, he's coming with us. We're borrowing him. We're taking Jim on a trip. And I love that type of story. Other people will call and tell me their memories, but I love that as a present tense.
Well, because it's an active ritual and honoring that keeps his memory alive. And I mean, he's living on through them and through these experiences, which I just absolutely love. You're actually reminding me of a story. A gal I know from when I lived in Houston, her husband passed away. Oh my God, it was awful. She had three little kids, and husband died of a brain tumor. And he was a big golfer. And so every year since he's passed, and it's been, I don't know how many years now, 7 or 8, they do a big golf, charity fundraiser in his name. And all of his friends and a family and all the people who knew, and they come in and like, they make it this annual event. So similar to what you're talking about. Yeah. And those are so important for everybody, and I think you bring up a really good point, Sam, is that a lot of times we focus on the family of people who've passed away, but we forget about the friends. I have a dear friend who passed away the day after my birth mom died, actually, just this past April. And she was only 55, maybe 55, 56 when she died. And because I was in Florida and I was grieving with my family because my mother had just died, it was really hard for me to grieve my friend's loss. So a couple weeks ago, her sister was in town because her sister inherited her home here in Asheville. And I was able to go over to her home. And her sister allowed me to choose some of my friend's items. So I got some of her books, some of her art supplies. And I have been writing. She had these purple pens, these precise pens. Well, your podcast listeners can't see it, but I'm showing it to you. And she had all these purple pens. And so I've been writing with purple pens in honor of Brenda ever since.
I love it.
And, and again, such a simple thing, but it was like, I finally feel like I've been able to connect with her loss. Because when you have multiple losses at a time, and I certainly know I'm not the only one who's had that, it's hard to process it all. So you've got to find the time and space to eventually do that. But yeah, so lots of other people are impacted, not just families, I guess my point.
And that's one that gets very ignored.
Yes. Yeah. What do you do when a friend dies? There's a huge gap, just a huge gap for so many people. So, because for many of us, friends are family. Yeah.
They were absolutely family. We had a funeral in Colorado in January, and they threw one in March in Michigan because not everyone could get to Colorado. We're originally from Michigan. But now that you say that, it reminds me, they love dressing up. I'm 50, Jim was 52. Most of his friends were around that or older, but they still dress up. And so of all the things, I kept all of his costumes. But one of his tallest fraternity brother kept one of his costume. He had like big boy overalls in green and white, not red and white. And he wears them to like football games. And so that's another, so seeing that anytime they'll send me pictures and it just cracks me up and I love it.
That's
These
great.
are the things. So two people who worry about what to say, who hold back, these things make us so happy, and it's the lack of rituals. The funeral ends and everyone goes home, and that's when our pain is the worst. That's when we are
Yes.
left to be on our own and we need everyone more. So the rituals, there are the people who know and who call me every birthday, anniversary, and I wouldn't be here without those people, but everybody else, life goes on and ours is permanently changed. So I love this topic. It does not have to be a funeral, a celebration of life, a golf out. It doesn't have to be that. These are examples that it can be, talk about smaller ones. It can be wearing a necklace. It can be writing a letter at night. I do feel, and I'm not the only, many, many people feel forgotten after the funeral.
Yes. Yes. So true. I think one thing I wanted to add too, you said talk about some of the smaller ones, is I think there are creative ways to process our grief, creative rituals that allow us to move through things. In fact, I just did a Facebook Live on this in my Facebook group. I have a Facebook group called Sacred Celebrations, which your listeners are welcome to join if they would like to. But I just did a whole thing about creative rituals to process grief, and something you just said reminded me that I wanted to share that. So one of my colleagues lost her mother and her brother last year, two completely unrelated things, and as part of finishing up her family's estate, she had 100 keys to tractors and barns and jewelry boxes and safe deposit box, like, just all sorts of stuff. So she had these 100 keys and she'd been carrying them around, and she'd been carrying around in this little purple pouch. She said it was like 8 pounds of keys. And so I was emailing with her the other day, this is about 2 weeks ago. And I said, how are you? She said, well, I want to show you a photo of something that I just made. And she made a wind chime out of those 100 keys.
Oh.
And I just started crying when I saw the image. I was like, oh my goodness, this is so beautiful. And, she wasn't so consciously aware. But as I was reflecting back to her, I said, what a powerful ritual that you just did for yourself. Here you are stringing each one of these keys and you're remembering, like, oh, this is to the old Ford pickup truck. And oh, this is to mom's jewelry box. And this is to that. And she said, of course, she forgot what a lot of them were, but many of them she remembered. And she said it took her back to childhood and memories and things like that. And so now she has this beautiful key wind chime that is hanging in her studio. It's just so cool.
That's amazing. wanted to keep all of Jim's shirts and sweatshirts. I was wearing them as night shirts and and there were just too many. So
Yeah.
I have a blanket that is, I have some, but I made a blanket. People make pillows, all sorts of things.
Yes.
Those are great suggestions. I don't want to run out of time. We are writing together. That's another
Yes.
type of ritual way to heal. You
Yes.
guys can see more of Elizabeth when Faces of Grief comes out, but talk
Yeah.
about your program and how people can find you and work with you if they're connecting.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. So, yeah, well, people can find me at my website, elizabethbarbour.com, and also sacredcelebrations.com. In addition to the book, Sacred Celebrations, Designing Rituals to Navigate Life's Transitions, I also actually have a jewelry line, and which is sort of separate from my coaching, but it is also integrated because a lot of the people who buy from me are buying the talismans as a way to connect with people. So sometimes it might be, a family who lost a loved one and they might buy bracelets for all the sisters and all the mothers so that they wear an onyx bracelet at the funeral or, celebration of life. So that's one thing. But Solid Ground is starting on March 13th. It's a 10-week coaching program, and it is for women who are navigating transition right now, particularly who are feeling overwhelmed by grief and loss. And the container is not just, I don't even want to say not just, it's a women's circle designed to help us move through these transitions very intentionally. So rituals are going to be a huge part of it. We'll have weekly simple rituals for participants to do to help them as they're navigating their grief. So the women who are coming into this program are coming from, different perspectives. One is closing down a business, another one has had the death of loved ones. Other folks are dealing with different kinds of losses. So it's a great way to get support and learn some practical tools to help you get unstuck. That you talked a lot about anxiety and depression and overwhelm, and so many of us are in that place. And part of how we move through it is by being in community, I think, being seen.
Yes. And so do you do one-on-one work if somebody feels like
Yes.
not ready for a group?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I do one-on-one work with folks. I do group work. I'm available for speaking. And then I do have my Facebook group, Sacred Celebrations, that people can join. And that's just it. It's a fun place. I will say it is a little bit lighter, but I do touch on some of the heavier topics of, grief and loss and transition and all that. So
We'll put all those links in the show notes. We'll put the link
okay.
to your book. Am I forgetting anything?
I don't think so. I just want to say to you, Sam, that I am so excited to be in your world because I think the work that you are doing on grief and loss and calling attention to it and what you're doing is you're amplifying different people's voices around this universal topic. And I think it's life-changing stuff. So I'm excited to be on this journey with you.
And that's a great point. Elizabeth will not only be a part of the book, she'll be at Healing Together through the holidays in December. So she's going to be here through the year. So you can listen, watch, click the links, and just stay tuned to see more of her. Say the websites again and the links.
Okay. It's elizabethbarbour.com, sacredcelebrations.com. And then you can find me on Facebook or Instagram also at Elizabeth Barbour and Sacred Celebrations. So.
And Barbour's BARBOUR if you're driving. And thank you so, so much for your time, your story. And until next time, everyone listening, always be ruthless.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening today. Your support means everything to me, truly. If this podcast resonates with you, please do me a favor and join in the Ruthless movement by making some noise and doing one of these 4 things. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Tell a friend so we can break stigmas even faster. Leave a review so people can see what you think of the show. And last, if you want to learn more about me and be a part of the Grief Hab community, please head on over to the Facebook group. We'd love to have you. Thanks again for spending your time with us, and see you next week.